Good day, everyone. I hope you're feeling happy and you're feeling well. I'm talking about feelings because today we're talking about something that is felt. We're talking about the power of the placebo effect, which is interesting. I found this very interesting. The last time I presented on this topic, I really had fun with it, and I hope it'll be interesting to you too. But before we go any farther, of course, I always want to stop and pray. Thank you so much for your goodness, Lord, and bless us as we look at this very interesting idea, the idea of suggestion, anticipation, and expectancy. And I pray, oh Lord, that you might help us in understanding this simple idea to understand how it could benefit and how it can harm us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, today we're going to be looking at the power of placebo. The placebo effect is used in almost all published studies in the world because the placebo is used as the idea of a control. Now, the word placebo comes from the Latin word and actually comes from the Latin Bible. So there were two main sources of biblical text. There was this Receptus, and then there was the Sinaiticus. And the Sinaiticus has the more corrupt text, and that's where many versions of the Bible are based on. The Receptus is where the King James Version or the Valeria Reina or those really royal versions are based on. So in the Latin Vulgate, in the Septuagint, in Psalms 114:9, in Latin, and I have to read this, it says, placebo domino en region vivorum. I am not a Latin speaker by any means, but that's actually the first use of that word in its coming into the use. It's being used so often in the medical world, but that's the absolute use of it. And it comes, as you can see, with a funeral. And those that have come are connected to the person or the deceased person, and they're helping that person to, in their minds, go off to another world. And so they are saying, I will please the Lord in the land of the living. And part of that pleasing is helping with the sacred rites of funeral services. This is the word for placebo. This is the origins of the word placebo. I will please. So in a medical practice, it's the idea of the patient pleading to the doctor for something, and a doctor saying, I will please. The doctor is going to give you something. So in the early 1800s, in the dictionary of Hooper in 1811, is the first time we have a definition for the word placebo, and it's basically the idea of something being given to the patient to please them rather than something that is clinical or something that is more of a prescribed benefit. Today in clinical studies, they used to use sugar pills. They still do. They would use saline water. They still do. But now today they actually use sometimes psychopharmaceuticals in order to act as a placebo so that the patient will get an effect of some kind that makes them believe that they're actually getting an effect. Now, I want to go on the board here and show you the 3 avenues of healing. So there are three main avenues of healing. Three main avenues of healing. The first one is a self-heal mechanism. So in the self-heal mechanism, this is the idea of you don't have to do anything. Within you is the ability to self-heal by design. And there is some truth to this because we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so we do have the ability largely to self-heal by design. The second avenue of healing is in non-specific mechanism. And this is the reaction of the patient to the therapist and the therapeutic location. So I call this the power of the white coat. That's what I call it. So if I was wearing a white coat right now, your reaction to me would be a little bit different. So this is when we walk into the doctor's office or the lifestyle center or the sanitarium or the chiropractor, wherever we go, and we see the therapist and they're smiling and they have on a white coat and maybe they have a stethoscope over, and immediately we get a sense of, yes, I'm going to feel better. In fact, some people just feel better just going to the hospital. Some people have the opposite reaction. But these non-specific ideas are the ideas of us walking and our reaction to the therapist and the therapeutic environment. And then 3, the other avenue of healing is specific mechanism. And this is actually to things or therapies that have been prescribed, which would include drugs, pharmaceuticals. And so all of these are the main methods of it. And in this specific way, now you're looking for a particular reaction. So this is when you talk about specific avenue of healing or a specific mechanism, you're looking for a particular reaction. You're given something, you go through a treatment, a therapy, a surgery, and it is for a very specific particular reaction. So the non-specific idea, the power of the white coat, this would be placebo effect. Right? So these are 3 main avenues of healing that exist in the world today. But more than this, in terms of the avenues, of healing, this last avenue, which I told you is a specific mechanism in terms of you prescribing something for someone and you're looking for a very particular effect. Even within this idea, it can be break down into a specific reaction. So I give you a massage, I give you a therapy, I give you a treatment, and I'm looking for the drug or the herb or the hand manipulation or whatever I did, whatever therapy was prescribed to you. I'm looking for a very specific reaction for that. So if it's to bring a fever down, for example, or to decrease pain or something. But then there are also non-specific reactions, and these are side effects, and you'll see this prevalently in the drug world. And then there are unintended effects or reactions, and this again is placebo. And then, believe it or not, in the world there is something called a reaction that is serendipitous, or the idea of serendipity. And this is about, some people would call it luck. Some people would say it's karma. What I say it is providence. So this is, for example, you've gone to the doctor's office and something has been bothering you on your left side, but you're not thinking about that because you're going to the office because you have a sore throat. And you have to wait because the last patient is taking more of the doctor's time, so your appointment is late. And whilst you're sitting there, somebody comes in and you start talking to them, and then they start telling you about something their brother has that sounds like the same thing that you have, and you end up getting understanding or help from that. Serendipity. So all of these possibilities occur when it comes to treatments, when it comes to the avenues of healing. And placebo effect is always in that realm. The placebo effect is always in that realm. So placebo can alleviate pain, and this is a very well-known fact that it can alleviate pain, but it's more pronounced in pain that is already there than in pain that is being induced, or acute pain. So we're going to turn to the screen and let's look at placebo and depression. Placebo and depression. So people with depression who benefited from the placebo showed signature changes in the brain and also responded better to subsequent medication. In fact, what they found is 50 to 75% of the antidepressant, whatever antidepressant they're using, of that antidepressant effect is actually due to the placebo effect. Now, there are many theories around the placebo effect. It's still being studied. It's kind of like a large science. How can we feel our way to health? It's kind of interesting, right? And I mean, it is observable to some extent, it is measurable to some extent. But when we talk about the placebo effect, we're more talking about a felt, something that is felt. In the theory is based on expectancy, it's based on anticipation, it's based on bias, it's based on conditioning, your culture, your education, what you believe, motivation. So for example, in terms of the power of the white coat, those non-specific parts of idea, many of us, when we go to a doctor or we see somebody in a white coat or a stethoscope, our minds are prepared to tell us they know what they're talking about. We're going to be better. So we anticipate getting answers. We anticipate being better. Now, I know that this is not always true, but this is how we have been, cultured to believe. And so some of us too have high motivation, I don't feel well, but I believe, yes, when I go to Dr. So-and-so, I'm going to be well. Or when I go to this best hospital, I'm going to be well. We have this sort of anticipation, which very much affects our mind. And like in the case of depression, 75%. In fact, some studies have shown that the placebo effect is just as good or even better than most antidepressants. It's all in your mind. I mean, it's all in your mind, for sure, but it's also science. In 1975, a discovery was made. Patients who had undergone the placebo effect, so they were studying them and they gave them a placebo and they were responding to it. When they injected them with naloxone, which is a drug that blocks your opioid release, thereby blocking your endorphin and your feel-good hormones, the placebo effect plunged until it was no more. So it definitely seems as if these anticipatory ideas, these motivational ideas, these things based on bias and how the place looks, how the doctor is, I really believe that he's gonna be able to help my son. These ideas have an effect on brain chemistry, and that brain chemistry has an effect on the body. What they're seeing in science is not just that chemicals affect cells, but brain waves, electrical waves, which are brain waves, neurological waves. They've seen that electrical wave passing over a cell can actually affect the cell, how it's moving. So cells are not only being manipulated by chemistry, they're being manipulated by emotions. Now, this is very important, very important. Now, I have a question. Could a little bit of sugar keep you from catching a cold or cure a skin disease, help a cancer? Could a little bit of sugar make you drunk? Well, it's interesting, but what they found out, there was a study where a group of people were given alcohol and another placebo group were given something that looked like alcohol. It tasted like alcohol. It had a kick to it, but it had no alcohol at all. Nothing, in fact, to make one intoxicated. Yet, a large participating group got tipsy, and some of them just got outright drunk. And that's amazing that we can think ourselves into drunkenness because we think we've been given something that's intoxicating. Think about that for a moment and tell me if that doesn't seem to you to be very, very powerful. Then, of course, there's the idea of warts, which is remarkable because we're talking about a wart, a skin trouble. And what they did, again, with a group of people in a study was that they give them something that is antifungal, and they give them placebo for the warts. And in this study, really, there was no difference between the outcome. That's remarkable, friends. Again, the power of the mind. What's even more remarkable is in 1950s study, and this is a MedPub study, where they were doing angina pectoris, and they would do this ligation of the mammarian arteries because they believed that somehow this would help in this kind of pectoral angina. And what they did was that there were 13 patients that received the real surgery, and then there were 5 patients that received the fake surgery. In other words, they were cut, but nothing wasn't done to them. They received the placebo surgery. Well, 76% of the 13 patients that had the real surgery, they improved. 100% of the 5 patients that had the fake surgery got better. Friends, I think that is remarkable in the effects, again, of placebo. So let's take a look at the screen again as we look at the placebo effect, the drug versus the sugar pill, the idea of feeling. Very popular study of the placebo effect with Pavlov's dog. There was a bell. When the bell rang, the dog came, meat was given, the dog was happy. This was done over and over again until when he rang the bell, the dog would be happy and would do the things that he would do without the meat. It just boggles my mind about how we are when it comes to the power of the mind and the power of suggestion, which leads me to the darker side of the placebo effect. Whilst the placebo effect has some positive effects in the medical world, there's a darker side to this. So this is a conversation with a doctor by the name of Hubert Benson, and he believes in the power of belief to real extreme levels. And so someone asked him, your thesis is that the power of belief, as demonstrated by the placebo effect, allows us remembered wellness? And he responds, we are wired. All our memories, all our thoughts are constellations to various connections in our brain, which is extraordinary and complex. So you can be wired to a certain configuration to your brain that could produce a headache. If I were in front of you saying headache, 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 you would be reminded of a headache, and indeed a headache would be reproduced. Similarly, you have wiring to being without a headache. So if you take a pill and you believe it will work even though it's only a sugar pill, you will then turn on that wiring and the headache will disappear. You have remembered what it was to be without a headache. You have remembered wellness. I think this is a fascinating idea when it comes to suggestion being used as a placebo demonstrating placebo effect from remembered wellness or the repetition of headache, headache, headache. I'm going to show you how dangerous this can be and how we must have control over emotions. We must have control over our mind, or we're going to be able to be moved by all kinds of things and manipulated in a way that we shouldn't be. So we have to, I don't want to remove your non-specific response in terms of your healing, but I want us to have our reason and our common sense override even the placebo effect. It's very important. So one professor, he was looking at this idea of belief and placebo effect with his students. And what he did, he told them he was going to write on their forehead something, and he would send them out for a week and they would tell him what reaction they had. And whatever you would write, you can't see it, and only when you hit the sun you can see it a little bit. So he wrote on all of his students on their foreheads, and they went out and they spent a week, and when they came out they said, "Professor, we had such a great time. Somebody started dating, somebody got a new job." I mean, they had, all of his students had such a positive impact. And then the professor said, "Wonderful, I'm so happy, but only 1/3 of you had anything written on the forehead. So the other 2/3 of the class were just experiencing placebo effect, a placebo effect that made them happier." Fascinating idea. Remember, I told you that part of placebo effect is about anticipation. It's about how you were conditioned, how you were educated, what you believe, your system that is responsible for this reaction. So this fellow, he's another professor, and he was doing some studies on placebo effect. What he did was that he got some things, and he had 4 groups, and it was made in the US but cheap, made in the US but expensive, made in China but cheap, and made in China but expensive. Now everybody had the same thing, but this was just the labeling, and they didn't know the labeling. And so he gave it to them, and to them, what worked most for them was the ones that were expensive. Fascinating. So they had the same thing, but the one that had most of an effect on them was the one that was expensive. Again, how we are brought up, how we are conditioned is very, very important. So in a recent past, if you turn your eyes to the slide, in a recent past, we had a worldwide placebo effect. And I believe that we, as a world, are under a lot of different placebo effects. I believe that the power of suggestion, the power of belief, and the power behind what we anticipate as being for our wellness in terms of the non-specific avenue of what it is, bypasses even the specifics. It overrides the common sense. Even the inherent healing is overrode, and it seems that we are off balance a little bit. So in 2019, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, recommended social distancing, staying at least 6 feet apart from others indoors and outdoors as part of its guidance to stop community spread of COVID-19. As long as you were in the world and you went out anytime during COVID, you would have remembered that some people were trying to make you stand 6 feet apart. 2024, the article near it. Dr. Anthony Fauci confessed to lawmakers that the guidelines to keep 6 feet of separation just kind of caught on. If you read the article, that's what it says. It just kind of caught on, and it caught on without any scientific fact. In fact, I remember some people really believed that they were going to be well if they stayed 6 feet away from me. And there is no possibility that 6 feet could prevent an airborne disease. But again, as we believe, This is I can't underscore how important it is that whilst the placebo effect is important in treatment of disease, and I use the placebo effect in treating friends and people that I meet that are diseased, because it's important that they think that they're going to be well. It's important that they have a hope. And sometimes I use that effect, and I remember I learned about that effect from my mother, actually, who was a nurse at one of the largest Catholic hospitals in my country. And while she was there, some of the patients would be in so much pain. And she would say, what we're going to do is give them an injection of saline water. She would put in an injection. And she would either syringe it into their bag, their saline bag, or she would inject it into their bodies. And boy, oh boy, they would say, thank you so much, Nurse Gomes. We feel so much better. And so whilst placebo effect has a place, and in clinical studies, in order for us to have a more controlled environment, I'm also saying that, the Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And we have to make sure that we're not just following the white coat. When Dr. Fauci sat there with his white coat, a lot of people around the world just believed him. They had a non-specific response. But we want to be using all the avenues of healing. And we want to have them under our conscience and under our common sense. Well, may the Lord bless you. And may you enjoy some placebo effect soon. A good one. May the Lord bless you.